Throughout the history of mixed martial arts, it is quite difficult to find a fighter with a reputation as mythical as Khabib Nurmagomedov. Undefeated, arguably the greatest lightweight champion of all time, the coach for the current pound-for-pound king, and the winner of the biggest fight in the history of the entire sport. Even though years have passed since he retired, fans continue to bring up Khabib's dominance, how he ragdolled his opponents, how he was never hurt, how, in a sport of blood, he was the only one who never bled. This aura of dominance, along with his record of 29 wins and 0 losses, has led to him achieving a sort of mythological status that other great fighters have failed to capture. Despite the longevity of their title reigns, both Demetrius Johnson and George St. Pierre have lost. John Jones has tested positive for performance-enhancing drugs, was gifted a decision against Dominic Reyes, and clearly ducked a fight with Tom Aspinall despite the UFC offering him $30 million for the bout. And even Islam Makhachev, who has achieved a legacy that is arguably greater than Khabib's, has that ever-present 1 next to his record from when he was knocked out cold by Adriano Martins. Outside of the cage, Khabib Nurmagomedov is seen as a man of faith, a devout Muslim and family man who retired as a promise to his mother after the passing of his father, Abdulmanap. And according to The Guardian, he is the second most popular Muslim athlete in the world, only being surpassed by the Egyptian footballer Mohamed Salah. This perception of Khabib Nurmagomedov as a righteous man is further bolstered by the openly degenerate behavior of the UFC's other top stars, with Conor McGregor and John Jones' criminal behavior, substance abuse, and behavior towards women coming to mind. All of this has led to Khabib Nurmagomedov being perceived of as one of the good guys in mixed martial arts. The undefeated hero who silenced the trash-talking, alcoholic, sex pest Conor McGregor. The strict but fair coach who nurtured the next generation of elite Dagestani fighters. The faithful Muslim who loves God and his family. But what if I were to tell you that there is another side to Khabib Nurmagomedov? A side that isn't known by the vast majority of the MMA fanbase. Recently, we caught a glimpse of this side of the Eagle when he began promoting a set of digital collectible gifts called Khabib's Papaka, which are, to put it simply, essentially NFTs that are sold through the messaging app Telegram. To market these NFTs, Khabib Nurmagomedov brought up his deceased father, Abdulmanap, which was a move that drew the ire of some fans. These digitized papakas were each auctioned off, with the average price being $1,700 US. As was reported by Russia Today, the total revenue for the project was approximately 347 million rubles, or around $4.4 million. All from a Telegram sticker that will inevitably crater in value. So, in this video, I would like to show you the side of the eagle that the UFC wants you to ignore. The side that the casual fans of the sport will happily look past. The side that may lead to me getting kidnapped and sent to a prison camp in Siberia. So, without further ado, here are the countless controversies of Khabib Nurmagomedov. When those that hate on fighters from Dagestan speak about the group, there's a certain term that they often use. Inbred! Now, in this context, this term is obviously being used with derogatory intent. Saying that someone is an inbred is to say that there is something wrong with them at a fundamental genetic level. However, the uncomfortable truth is that, when it comes to the Dagestanis, this term is also mostly correct. In 2013, Khabib Nurmagomedov married Patimat Nurmagomedova, a childhood friend and, quote, distant cousin. Exactly how closely Khabib and Patimat are related is unclear, but as you can tell from the shared surname, they are indeed from the same family. Consanguineous unions are commonplace in the Republic of Dagestan, which is due both to the mountainous geography of the region leaving different ethnic groups isolated from each other, and the Islamic faith permitting marriages between cousins. According to a 2006 study by Kazima Bulieva titled Overview of Genetic Epidemiological Studies in Ethnically and Demographically Diverse Isolates of Dagestan, North Caucasus, Russia, the inbreeding coefficient for many Dagestani ethnic groups is around 0.01 to 0.015. Just to explain very quickly, the inbreeding coefficient, which is typically denoted in the format f equals x, is a measure of how much more closely related an individual's parents are than two random individuals from the same population. The inbreeding coefficient quantifies the probability that two alleles at a given locus are identical by descent rather than by chance. The value of the inbreeding coefficient ranges from f equals 0 to f equals 1, with f equals 0 being a case where an individual is as unrelated to itself through its parents as any random pair in the population, and f equals 1 being a case where an individual is completely inbred, with every single allele being identical by descent. Inbreeding is harmful because it increases the likelihood of an individual inheriting two copies of harmful mutated recessive alleles at a given loci, which in turn codes for a genetic disorder. For reference, the inbreeding coefficient for the offspring of first cousins is 0.0625, and between second cousins, it is 0.0156. This means that for first cousins, there is a 6.25% chance, and for second cousins, a 1.56% chance that, at any given gene loci, two recessive alleles are paired up. Since there are an estimated 19,000 to 20,000 protein coding genes in the human genome, the offspring of first cousins would have 1,200 to 1,300 recessive pairs, and the offspring of second cousins would have around 300 to 310 pairs. Although not all of these recessive pairs lead to genetic diseases, the sheer quantity of pairings makes it far more likely for the children of cousin marriages to develop diseases than the children of parents who are not related. As I discussed earlier, the inbreeding coefficient of some Dagestani populations in 2006 was as high as 0.015, which is very close to the inbreeding coefficient for children who are the result of second cousin marriages. For comparison, the inbreeding coefficient of major North American and European populations range from 0.00008 for US Catholics to 0.00275 for Spaniards. This means that Dagestanis have an inbreeding coefficient that is nearly 5.5 times higher than the most inbred Europeans. This high rate of consanguinity results in the Dagestanis suffering from higher rates of complex genetic diseases than other populations. Examples include cancer, progressive muscular dystrophy, cardiovascular issues, hearing loss, and mental retardation. One genetic disease common in Dagestanis that has had extensive research done about it is schizophrenia. According to the book Genomic Architecture of Schizophrenia Across Diverse Genetic Isolates, a study of Dagestan populations, which was also written by Kazima Bulieva with the help of some of her colleagues, there is a very strong correlation between inbreeding and schizophrenia in the Dagestanis. As stated clearly here, Dagestanis with schizophrenia have an inbreeding coefficient that is nearly 2.7 times higher than in healthy individuals. And furthermore, due to the isolated nature of Dagestani populations, the risk of genetic disease increases over the generations due to more harmful recessive alleles remaining in the gene pool from inbreeding. Now, you may be thinking at this point, if the Dagestanis are so inbred, why are fighters like Khabib and Islam Makhachev so dominant? And well, that is because they are the healthy ones. They are the ones who survived the genetic lottery in the germline. As MMA fans, we don't see the Dagestanis who are burdened with the negative consequences of inbreeding. Most of them are confined to their houses in the mountains or are suffering in hospitals. Well, with one likely exception. Magomedov is a sort of mascot for Team Khabib. Despite looking like a child, Hasbulla is a man in his early 20s who suffers from dwarfism caused by a growth hormone deficiency due to a defective pituitary gland. And there's a significant amount of scientific literature showing that growth hormone deficiencies in humans can be caused through recessive genetic mutations. Now, there is no way to know for certain, but I believe it is highly likely that Hasbulla's condition is a consequence of having genetically related parents. To further add to my case, I want to bring up Abdurazik, a Tajikistani influencer who is seen as Hasbulla's rival. Razik suffers from the same condition as Hasbulla. And, coincidentally, Tajikistan is also known for its high rates of cousin marriage. While Hasbulla enjoys a life of wealth and luxury due to his proximity to Khabib, there are countless other Dagestani children who suffer in silence from the negative consequences of inbreeding. And by having children with his cousin, Khabib multiplies the risk of condemning his offspring to a life of suffering resulting from a complex genetic disease. But as I wrap this segment up, I do have to make this clear. Although the Dagestanis practice cousin marriage, many other Muslim ethnic groups in the region do not. Notably, the Chechens have taboos around marrying one's relatives, as do the Ingushetians, Kazakhs, and Kyrgyzstanis. Azerbaijan has gone so far as to ban marriages between relatives as of July 2025. So, it would be objectively incorrect and offensive to call Hamzat Chimaev, Mavzar Evloev, Shavkat Rakhmanov, or Rajabali Shaydalayev inbred, as they all come from cultures that understand the dangers of cousin marriage. And hopefully, for the sake of the genetic health of their children, the Republic of Dagestan will eventually follow in the footsteps of their neighbors. But until then, the term inbred, while it may be used as a pejorative, is descriptively correct for Dagestan. As I brought up at the beginning of this video, Khabib Nurmagomedov recently promoted a digital collectible scheme with his nation's hat, the papaka, while referencing his deceased father. However, this was not the first digital finance-related scheme that the Eagle has promoted, and it is far from the worst. In April 2021, Khabib Nurmagomedov announced a series of NFT cards to commemorate his retirement from MMA. These NFTs were separated into 3 categories: gold, platinum, and diamond. There were 290 gold cards and 29 platinum cards, with unsold cards from those 2 categories being burned, which is NFT terminology for being destroyed, to artificially increase scarcity to drive up prices. The gold and platinum cards featured special perks and exclusive giveaways, while the diamond cards were uniquely minted and gave owners a chance to meet Khabib in person. Now, I was not able to find any of the diamond cards on OpenSea besides the one in Khabib's personal wallet. However, I was able to find many of the gold and platinum cards. And well, the fluctuation in prices was what you would expect from an NFT. 5 years ago, when they were originally minted, each Khabib gold card was sold for $2,900 US, and each Khabib Platinum card was sold for a staggering $29,000 US. But as of now, in 2025, the value has cratered. The last Khabib Gold card was sold for $47.67, and one card was even sold for the paltry sum of $6.19. The current highest bid for the gold cards is $6.45, showing a staggering 99.78% loss in value. And it is even worse for the platinum cards. The latest platinum card was sold for $328, and the highest current bid is a minuscule $5. That is a 99.98% loss in value. And while you may say, hey, these are just NFTs, it's fine if they depreciate in value, people bought them just because they were such big fans of Khabib. Don't forget that Khabib announced that they would be burning the unsold gold and platinum cards to artificially boost their value, implying that these were supposed to be an investment of sorts.
But wait! There's more!
In 2021, Khabib Nurmagomedov became a brand ambassador for the crypto mining company Go Mining, and in 2023, he partnered with them to launch a series of Khabib-branded digital miners called the Khabib NFT Collection by BMine. These digital miner NFTs promised access to Khabib's private club, where owners would get the chance to meet the Eagle for dinner in Dubai, and were also marketed as highly energy-efficient cryptocurrency miners, with each miner purportedly having 29 terahashes per second of Bitcoin mining hash power, which is a reference to his 29-0 undefeated record. However, just like how that 29-0 record has that asterisk that is the Gleason-Tebow fight, there was a catch. Although the NFTs had a floor price of 0.5 to 1 Ethereum, or around $1,000 to $2,000 at the time of launch, the actual mining rewards were minimal. They were also tied to Go Mining's platform, which charges for electricity and maintenance fees that could actually lead to a holder of the miner coming out in the red. This led to the popular anti-scam YouTuber CoffeeZilla calling Khabib and Go Mining out for scamming the Eagles fans, saying that the digital miner NFTs were just gimmicks and the opposite of a wise investment. A short while after these allegations came out, OpenSea disabled transactions for the digital miners on their website due to violations of their terms of service. This, of course, caused those who bought into the miners early to lose their investments.
But wait! There's more!
On November 28, 2024, Khabib Nurmagomedov endorsed Convict, a meme coin inspired by Conor McGregor's civil case with Nikita Hand. The coin was originally promoted as a means to help McGregor's victims with their legal fees. However, as you would expect with a meme coin, the price had been pumped up to an absurd amount, and then, as you can see here from the graph on Gecko Terminal, dumped into worthlessness. The account that Khabib quote-tweeted has since been deleted, and the website that was associated with the Convict coin no longer exists. This was truly a classic pump and dump scheme.
But wait! There's more!
On October 25th, 2025, Khabib Nurmagomedov posted a video of himself announcing his partnership with the Multibank Group, a financial derivatives provider headquartered in Dubai. According to the partnership, Multibank Group and Khabib are going to tokenize over 30 Khabib gyms across the world into real-world assets, or RWAs. In other words, you're going to be able to own a stake in a given Khabib gym by buying cryptocurrency tokens. Supposedly, owners would gain access to a fraction of the profits from the gyms, and would also, and I'm noticing a pattern here, gain exclusive access to special events and even Khabib himself. The operation is underpinned by the Multibank Group token, MBG, and has resulted in the founding of a new subsidiary, Multibank Khabib LLC. The Multibank Group has also been given the exclusive right to develop projects related to Khabib's personal brand, the Eagle FC MMA promotion, and other projects. Now, this project so far does not look like a cryptocurrency or NFT pump and dump. However, like with anything related to digitized assets on the blockchain, there are risks. First, since this project is underpinned by the performance of Multibank's own token, the health of the endeavor depends on that token doing well. And well, over the past year, the MBG token has lost over 70% of its value, and has lost over 80% of its value from its all-time high. And peculiarly, since October 2025, the token has gone from being valued at around $1 to being valued at less than 50 cents, although there have been a few spikes in value during this time frame. This drop in value happened just a day before Khabib made his announcement on X, which makes me wonder about what's going on. And then that brings us to the Papaka digitized collectible asset scheme that Khabib most recently promoted on Telegram, which I have already explained. And while I was writing the script for this video, Conor McGregor spoke up and criticized Khabib for using his dead father and Dagestan's traditional hat to make money. And what was Khabib's response to this criticism? Well, he posted an advertisement. Quote, "You absolute liar. You will always try to darken my name after you got destroyed that night, but you will never achieve that. Yes, good guys don't do that. They don't create exclusive digital gifts with real-time value that you can share with your friends and family. Gifts in the shape of papaka hat that symbolize traditions and culture of Dagestan people. Traditions and culture that's slowly walking over this world, whether you like it or not. Gifts that you can find exclusively on Telegram, greatest messaging platform on the world. In particular, the comment about Telegram being the best messaging app in the world seems like something Pavel Durov, the creator of Telegram and the man who collaborated with Khabib to make the Papaka digital collectibles, would write. It is an unnatural tweet. Something you couldn't imagine coming from the little boy who grew up in the mountains wrestling bears. Or, I don't know, perhaps it's the schizophrenia resulting from generational inbreeding that I was talking about earlier finally manifesting itself. Now, Khabib Nurmagomedov has taken a strong stance against gambling in the past, which is something I personally agree with. He refused to take gambling sponsors for Eagle FC, stating that gambling is more dangerous than alcohol. But then, when you see the sheer number of shady cryptocurrency-related ventures Khabib Nurmagomedov has attached himself to, we need to begin asking ourselves, is the Eagle as principled of a man as he portrays himself to be? When I was originally planning this video, I planned to put Khabib's connections to Wahed and G42 AI in the same section as his cryptocurrency-related controversies. However, I decided to separate them, mainly because of the sheer number of cryptocurrency schemes Khabib is a part of made them warrant their own section. Now, if you've looked at the Eagle's social media in the past few years, you would have likely seen an advertisement for Wahed, a financial services and asset management company. Founded in 2017, Wahed was the first company to launch an exchange-traded fund in the United States that was compliant with Sharia law, and Khabib Nurmagomedov joined Wahed in 2021 as a brand ambassador and investor. These services are in demand because it is considered haram, or prohibited, for Muslims to invest in businesses that produce goods and provide services that are contrary to Islamic principles, with examples being manufacturers of alcoholic beverages and gambling companies. Wahed also provides services like an application that screens stocks for Sharia compliance and Sharia-compliant investments in real estate. While the company and others like it have been criticized for engaging in riba, which is the Islamic term for usury, Wahed has repeatedly asserted that they are compliant with Islamic principles. However, leaving aside the religious discussion about whether such a fund is halal or haram in the first place, the fund has gone through a number of other controversies. In 2022, the United States Securities and Exchange Commission charged Wahed with making misleading statements, breaching its fiduciary duty to its clients, and for compliance failures related to its Sharia advisory business. From here, I'm going to quote the press release from the SEC regarding the situation. Quote, according to the SEC's order, from September 2018 through July 2019, Wahed Invest advertised the existence of its own proprietary funds when no such funds existed, and also promised investors that it would periodically rebalance their advisory accounts, but did not do so. The SEC's order further finds that when Wahed Invest ultimately launched a proprietary ETF in July 2019, it used its clients' advisory assets to seed the ETF without prior disclosure to clients of any conflicts of interest. The order also finds that Wahed Invest marketed itself as providing advisory services compliant with Islamic or Sharia law, including marketing the importance of its income purification process on its website. Despite these representations, the order finds that Wahed Invest did not adopt and implement written policies and procedures addressing how it would assure Sharia compliance on an ongoing basis. Robo-advisors, like other advisors, must ensure that their marketing materials are not misleading and that conflicts are disclosed to investors, said Adam S. Aderton, co-chief of the SEC Enforcement Division's Asset Management Unit. Registered investment advisors like Wahed Invest must also adopt and implement written policies and procedures reasonably designed to prevent the advisor from deviating from its claimed investment process. Wahed Invest consented to the entry of the SEC's order, finding that the firm violated Sections 2062 and 2064 of the Investment Advisors Act of 1940 and Rules 20641A and 20647. Without admitting or denying the SEC's findings, Wahed Invest agreed to a cease and desist order, to pay a $300,000 penalty, and to retain an independent compliance consultant, among other undertakings. So, in other words, they claimed to be a Sharia-compliant fund, but ended up not being Sharia-compliant.
But wait! There's more!
Wahed Invest had another run-in with the SEC in November of 2024, this time being charged with marketing rule violations, and this time involving an athlete endorsement. And again, I quote from the SEC website. The order finds that Wahed disseminated advertisements containing paid endorsements from professional athletes that lacked required disclosures and advertised hypothetical performance to the general public on its website without adopting and implementing required policies and procedures. Registered investment advisors are prohibited from including any endorsement in an advertisement unless, among other things, the investment advisor clearly and prominently discloses that the endorsement was given by a person other than a current client or investor, that compensation was provided, and a brief statement of any material conflicts of interest. In addition, the material terms of any compensation arrangement must also be disclosed. The SEC's order finds that for more than 18 months, Wahed disseminated advertisements via its website, social media, and email that included endorsements from compensated professional athletes, including one with an ownership interest in Wahed's parent company. The advertisements failed to include the required disclosures, according to the order. Registered investment advisors are also prohibited from including hypothetical performance in their advertisements unless they have adopted and implemented policies and procedures reasonably designed to ensure the hypothetical performance is relevant to the likely financial situation and investment objectives of the intended audience of the advertisement. The SEC's order finds that for more than 17 months, Wahed advertised hypothetical returns for several different strategies to mass audiences on its website without having the required policies and procedures. The SEC's order finds that Wahed willfully violated the anti-fraud provisions of Section 2064 of the Advertisers Act and Rules 20641B and D thereunder. Without admitting or denying the order's findings, Wahed consented to a cease and desist order, a censure, to comply with undertakings not to advertise hypothetical performance without having the requisite policies and procedures, and to ensure its advertisements comply with the marketing rule, and a civil penalty of $250,000. Now, let me reread the most important part of this. The SEC's order finds that for more than 18 months, Wahed disseminated advertisements via its website, social media, and email that included endorsements from compensated professional athletes, including one with an ownership interest in Wahed's parent company. The advertisements failed to include the required disclosures according to the order. Now, remember, Khabib Nurmagomedov joined Wahed in 2021 as an ambassador and investor. So, based on this information from the SEC, it is highly likely that Khabib was involved in this breach of financial regulations. Recently, another controversy about Wahed has come to light. According to the Hyphen, a news magazine focusing on Muslim life in the United Kingdom and Europe. Halal investors and pension holders may be unknowingly contributing to and profiting from a certain extremely controversial conflict between Natan Levy and Bilal Muhammad's countries in the Middle East, which I cannot mention explicitly here without getting this video shadow banned. In an article written by Lucas Kumiski, it is shown that Wahed FTSE USA Sharia has large investments in Microsoft, Alphabet, Cisco, Motorola, Axon, Chevron, Valero Energy Corp, and Monster Beverage Corp. Of these companies, Microsoft, Cisco, and Alphabet, which is Google's parent company, are pressure targets for the boycott, divestment, and sanctions movement. And Chevron is a priority target for BDS. The article further states that a subsidiary of Valero Energy Corp provides Natan Levy's country with jet fuel, and that the charitable arm of Monster Beverage Corp donated $322,000 to the Friends of the Defense Forces of Natan Levy's country. Worst of all might be Axon Enterprises, an American weapons manufacturer that makes tasers that may have allegedly been used by soldiers of Natan Levy's country to torture Bilal Muhammad's countrymen. In all fairness, the chief risk officer of Wahed, Umar Suleiman, did send a letter in March 2024 to the Accounting and Auditing Organization for Islamic Financial Institutions, a Bahrain-based nonprofit that maintains Sharia compliance, asking to add new criteria that would bar Islamic financial institutions from investing in firms that contribute to Natan Levy's side of the conflict. However, according to Suleiman, any sort of divestment from these companies would be a long and extremely drawn-out process, and if Wahed were to divest unilaterally, Suleiman states that the fund may be shut down due to a violation of its fiduciary responsibility to its clients. Now, I don't know the particulars of Wahed's situation, but it is worth noting that Norway's sovereign wealth fund sold off its stock from 11 companies from that country in August 2025, citing humanitarian concerns, and that Ireland's strategic investment fund divested from 6 companies as well. So, while Wahed may be making some moves to change this reality, currently, if you take Khabib Nurmagomedov's advice and invest with Wahed, you will be placing money in the pockets of John Silva's best friends. However, that is not the end of Khabib Nurmagomedov's controversial endorsements. On November 21st, 2025, Khabib promoted the company G42 AI, an artificial intelligence development holding company based in Abu Dhabi. The chairman of the company is Tanoum bin Zayed Al Nahyan, a member of the ruling family of the United Arab Emirates and the current national security advisor for the country. Sheikh Taoun has been involved in numerous controversies, including collaborating with the CIA to spy on political opponents in Project Raven, violating EU sanctions against Bashar al-Assad, reselling Russian Sputnik vaccines to less developed countries at a significant markup, and undermining Qatar through a series of smear campaigns. Currently, what he and the UAE as a whole may be most infamous for is their involvement in Sudan, where they are providing support to the Rapid Support Forces, or RSF, which are a paramilitary group commanded by Mohammed Hamdan Dagalo. The RSF have been documented committing numerous atrocities, specifically against non-Arab ethnic groups like the Masalit, and there are also reports from the United Nations showing that the UAE are smuggling weapons to them. However, leaving that aside, the shadiest thing G42 AI has been associated with is ToeTalk, a free messaging, video, and voice calling app. G42 was the sole registered shareholder for ToeTalk, and in 2019, a New York Times expose uncovered that ToeTalk had been being used by the UAE government to spy on users, leading to the app being removed from the Apple App Store. But if we are to criticize Khabib Nurmagomedov for having ties with G42 AI, it also warrants mentioning that US President Donald Trump also signed an agreement with G42 AI to develop an artificial intelligence campus outside of Chinese influence in March 2025. But considering how opposed Khabib is to having Islam Makhachev fighting at the White House, I believe that he wouldn't want to be put on the same level as the Big Don as he currently is. However, if you think that Khabib's association with the incredibly rich is just a byproduct of his career success as a mixed martial artist, you would be wrong. Because, from the very beginning, Khabib and his team have been backed by extreme, ill-gotten wealth. The team that Khabib Nurmagomedov trained out of during his UFC career, Eagles MMA, which was founded in 2016, was funded by the oligarch Ziyavudin Magomedov. Ziyavudin Magomedov, a Dagestani billionaire who comes from the same Avar ethnicity as Khabib and his family, was the head of the Summa Group, a collection of Russian corporations engaged in various fields, ranging from logistics to engineering to telecommunications. From 2008 until 2012, during the presidency of Dmitry Medvedev, Ziyavudin and the Summa Group secured billions of US dollars worth of government contracts from the Russian Federation, almost all of which was done through corrupt means. And during the first year of Dmitry's presidency, Ziyavudin's own personal fortune grew from 70 million US dollars to a staggering 800 million. This wealth accumulation was due in large part to Ziyavudin Magomedov's close friendship with Arkady Dvorvik, who was Medvedev's economic advisor. During the Eagles UFC run, Ziyavudin Magomedov was Khabib's biggest sponsor. This sponsorship included covering the medical expenses for Khabib's 2017 back surgery in Germany. A surgery which, if Khabib had not gotten it, we would have likely never seen Khabib become the star he is today. Once Dmitry Medvedev's presidency ended, and Vladimir Putin became the president of Russia once again, a crackdown began on Dmitry's cronies, including Ziyavudin. Ziyavudin Magomedov was arrested in 2018 while trying to flee to America, and eventually sentenced in 2022 to 19 years in prison for corruption and embezzlement of 11 billion rubles in government funds. He was also found to have organized a criminal syndicate within the Summa Group to facilitate the embezzlement. In 2018, following Ziyavudin's arrest, Khabib publicly appealed to Vladimir Putin to release the oligarch, but to no avail. The most recent news about Ziyavudin, which is from 2024, suggests that he has been transferred to a penal colony. On numerous occasions, Khabib Nurmagomedov has been found associating himself and showing tacit approval for terrorism. The earliest example of this came in 2018. After defeating Conor McGregor, Khabib was photographed in Dubai alongside Sajid Murtazaliev, a Dagestani gold medalist in freestyle wrestling. Sajid Murtazaliev, who was the head of the Dagestani branch of the pension fund for Russia, is currently wanted by the Russian government for financing jihadist terrorism and organizing multiple murders, including the killing of the deputy head of the Center for Countering Extremism under the Ministry of Internal Affairs for the Republic of Dagestan. Sajid Murtazaliev funded jihadist cells in Dagestan by paying out pensions to fictitious people, which was then collected by jihadists who were a part of the Vilayat Dagestan, a separatist jihadi group that is part of the Caucasus-wide Islamist network Vilayat Kavkaz. Now, of course, this was just a picture between Sajid and Khabib. However, there have been men much closer to Khabib who have been involved in terrorism in Dagestan. On Sunday, June 23, 2024, simultaneous attacks were launched against 2 Orthodox churches, 2 synagogues, and a police post in the cities of Derbent and Makhachkala. The attackers opened fire with automatic weapons and set fire to the religious buildings using Molotov cocktails. A total of 22 were killed, including an Orthodox priest who, instead of being shot, was dragged out of his parish and violently executed by having his throat slit. After clashing with law enforcement, the attackers either fled or were killed. And among the deceased terrorists was 28-year-old Gazimurad Kagirov, a fighter who had trained before with Khabib Nurmagomedov's team and was reported by Russian media outlets to be a student of Abdulmanap Nurmagomedov. This led to Khabib Nurmagomedov's gym in Dagestan being raided by the Russian intelligence services for jihadist ties. After the incident, Khabib released a statement that, while Kadyrov had done a training camp with his team, he was not an official member of the gym. Khabib also condemned the terrorist attack in a series of posts and sent his condolences to the victims. However, back in 2020, Khabib Nurmagomedov had a radically different set of things to say about a different terrorist attack, or rather, series of terrorist attacks. On October 16, 2020, Samuel Paty, a French secondary school teacher, was attacked and beheaded by Abdullah Anzarov, an 18-year-old Chechen Muslim. During a class he was teaching about free speech, Samuel Paty allegedly showed cartoons of the Islamic prophet Muhammad that Charlie Hebdo had drawn. In Islam, it is forbidden to portray Muhammad in visual form. This supposed act by Samuel led to a group of 10 people, including 2 students from Paty's school and an imam, conspiring in his murder. After the beheading, the French President Emmanuel Macron condemned Paty's murder as an act of Islamic terrorism and expressed his support for freedom of speech, including the right to show cartoons of the Prophet Muhammad. And shortly after Paty's beheading, on October 29, 2020, 3 Christians were killed in a stabbing attack at Notre Dame de Nice, a Catholic basilica in Nice, France. The victims included a 60-year-old woman who had been praying inside the basilica, a 55-year-old sexton, and a 44-year-old Brazilian-born Frenchwoman. The attack was perpetrated by a Tunisian migrant by the name of Brahim Aissai, who had been angered by Macron's support for freedom of speech and condemnation of Islamic extremism. Macron once again condemned this attack as an attack of Islamic terror, and once again defended France's secular values. In reaction to these events, Khabib Nurmagomedov posted a photo of Emmanuel Macron with a boot print stamped on his face, with the following caption: "May the Almighty disfigure the face of this creature and all his followers who, under the slogan of freedom of speech, offend the beliefs of more than 1.5 billion Muslims. May the Almighty humiliate them in this life and in the next. Allah is swift in reckoning, you will see. We are Muslims. We love our Prophet Muhammad more than our mothers, fathers, children, wives, and all other people close to our hearts. Trust me, these provocations will come back to them. The end is always for the God-fearing." He further added a verse from the Quran, Surah 33, verse 57, which reads, "Indeed, those who revile Allah and His Messenger, Allah has cursed them in this world and the hereafter and prepared for them humiliating torments." I will add that, according to the tafsir commentary by Ibn Abbas, a cousin of the Prophet Muhammad, who is considered to be the greatest mufassir, a Quran commentator, in Islam, this verse was revealed specifically about Jews and Christians. This post was liked millions of times, and even when approached to take it down, Khabib Nurmagomedov refused to do so. And remember this final part of his post: "Trust me, these provocations will come back to them. The end is always for the God-fearing," implying that the attacks were to be blamed on Macron and his stance in support of free speech, instead of on the actual perpetrators. And mind you, none of the 3 Christians at Notre Dame de Nice had even thought of posting a picture of Muhammad. And he made these remarks even though he asked for prayers after the shooting of Muslims in Christchurch, New Zealand, by a white nationalist, showing Khabib Nurmagomedov's hypocrisy. So, in conclusion, Khabib Nurmagomedov himself is not a terrorist. However, he has freely chosen to associate himself with a terrorist, has trained with a man who went on to commit jihadist terror, and has done his best to justify terror attacks to his millions of fans. Now, at this point, I could keep going through more and more of Khabib's controversies. If we're looking at his pro career, I could take my time to rescore the Gleison-Tibau fight, or closely examine the scales during his weigh-ins for the Justin Gaethje fight, which, as you may already likely know, had not settled before Khabib's weight was called. As for his personal views, there's the time he was wanted for tax evasion in Russia, and his reply when being asked about women's MMA by a female reporter.
Question for people who want to get into the fighting industry and start a fighting career, what tips do you recommend, especially for a female?
For female, I have very good advice. Be fighter inside your home.
And of course, there's the many brawls that he and his Dagestani teammates have started. But I titled this video, The Countless Controversies of Khabib Nurmagomedov, for a reason. It truly is difficult to find an end to all of them. So, I'd like to leave you with this. Here is a video of Khabib laughing like a maniac as his cousin, Abu Bakr, pays a homeless man to do push-ups. Now, contrast this with the image of Khabib that is presented to you in the mainstream. The stoic warrior, the man of faith who loves his family, the good guy. That is the side of Khabib Nurmagomedov, or rather, the myth of Khabib Nurmagomedov that the UFC, Dana White, the Emiratis, and Khabib himself wants you to see. But don't forget, there is another side to him. The man who married his cousin, who used his father's memory and his cultural heritage to sell products to his fans, who had a set of NFTs delisted from OpenSea due to their predatory nature, who promotes an investment fund that has money in companies that are blacklisted by BDS, and who believes his feelings are more important than the victims of terror attacks. So, the next time you see someone promoting Khabib Nurmagomedov as a paragon of moral virtue, send them this video. Perhaps they'll change their mind.